Yeah. Yeah.
What's that on that beat, ho?
Operation Enduring Freedom was the original name for the war in Afghanistan, but later was expanded to include the global war on terror. After 9/11, President George W. Bush gave the rulers of Afghanistan an ultimatum: hand over the terrorists responsible for 9/11 or share in their fate. The Taliban, the Islamic fundamentalists who ruled the country, refused to surrender their ally, terrorist leader Osama bin Laden. Airstrikes began on October 7, 2001, less than a month after 9/11. American, British, and other soldiers fought together with Afghans opposed to the Taliban. The goals: remove the Taliban from power, find bin Laden and his lieutenants, and destroy his organization, known as Al-Qaeda. Taliban forces fled from Kabul, the capital city, on November 12, 2001, and retreated towards the mountainous border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. With U.S. support, a new government was installed, with Hamid Karzai as president. The Taliban gradually rebuilt its fighting forces and carried out attacks against the new government and American soldiers. Noting the Taliban's growing strength and the difficulty of fighting an enemy hidden in remote caves and mountains, many observers said that the war was unwinnable. On December 1, 2009, President Obama announced a new strategy: the rapid deployment of 30,000 additional troops to break the Taliban's momentum and turn the war around. After the assassination of Osama bin Laden in May of 2011, President Obama announced he would accelerate the withdrawal of the American forces, reflecting, in part, America's war awareness and lingering economic woes. The war has so far resulted in 45,000 to 65,000 estimated military deaths and an estimated 16,000 to 19,000 civilian deaths. President Obama has recently stated that he will close the remaining U.S. bases in Afghanistan and withdraw all but 1,000 troops by the time he leaves office at the beginning of 2017. I interviewed Reilly Michener, who actually joined the military right out of high school.
So I was 17 actually when I joined. A lot of my friends were all like looking into it, stuff like that. A little bit, it was like paying for college, that kind of thing. Right. But a lot of it was wanting to be like more well-rounded people. Mm-hmm. And there's certain things you'll only learn in the military.
And while many more people joined the military after 9/11, Joe actually joined before.
I actually joined in November 7th of 2000. So if you timeline that, I joined a little bit before September 11th. Right. And, a year before. And I was actually in high school at the time. That following summer, was when I went to basic training and stuff. So I was actually there during September 11th. So that changed the perceptions a little bit. Yeah. As you can imagine. Right.
Unlike most American soldiers, Joe actually worked and spent most of his time on an Afghan military base.
I worked in a part shop, but it was a little bit odd because the part shop was on an Afghan base. Uh-huh. It wasn't an American base. Oh, I see. So, we would sleep at night on the American base, and then every day we'd wake up and go to work, and that was our place of work was on the Afghan base.
Before going to Afghanistan, Joe assumed that the war was just a war for oil, but that changed once he got more involved with the war.
Before I went over, I thought, this is definitely just a war for oil. Right, yeah. I was like, this is fucked up, we shouldn't even be over there. But when I went over there, they're so fucking poor. 8th most impoverished country in the world. Right. And it really made you, first of all, thankful to be born in a first world country. And then second of all, you're like, well, I don't know if we should be here, but we are doing some good here by doing stuff like distributing, food, supplies, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You'd see people living in, rubble. That's where, homeless people would live in the U.S. They'd find, an abandoned building. That's where, families were living there.
In a 2012 report, Amnesty International found that the war had left over 500,000 people homeless in Afghanistan.
The Afghans that I talked to, that I asked, how did they feel about our presence, they were generally happy that we had liberated them from the Taliban. Yeah. They were just kind of okay, but when are you going to leave? We don't want you here forever. This is still our country.
Afghanistan has long been the largest producing opium country in the world, And in 2007, 92% of non-pharmaceutical grade opiates on the world market originated in Afghanistan.
Towards the end of my tour, they started burning the drug cartel's opium fields, because Afghanistan was one of the largest opium producers in the world. It was kind of imperialist, you know, like we're going there. They don't allow alcohol, so it's not like I don't know. I felt like they don't allow alcohol, which is our drug of choice, but they do allow opium, which is their drug of choice, so why should we tell them that they're not allowed to do it? Most of the time I was there, the war effort was like mostly died down. You know, we were defending, we would occasionally, you know, meet with some, there'd be firefights with some Taliban, but it was very light. But then once they started burning the opium fields, it meant that the drug cartels now had a common enemy with the Taliban, which they used to be totally opposed to, right?
Yeah.
So now we were getting attacked instead of like twice a month, now we were getting attacked like once a night.
Joe told me about how information coming from Afghanistan could sometimes be misconstrued due to the fact that there were only 2 embedded journalists in all of Afghanistan.
After I was back for 3 months, I came back in July of 2006, around like October, maybe even later. News reports started listing the first direct fire engagement since the invasion. The thing that was frustrating about that was I was like, you know, people were getting shot at all the fucking time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we only had, when I left, there were only 2 embedded journalists in Afghanistan. Iraq was making most of the news, and it was a much more high-profile war. So we were calling ourselves the Second Forgotten War.
During his 1 year in Afghanistan, Joe was stationed at the Kandahar airfield in Kandahar, Afghanistan, which is the 2nd largest city in Afghanistan and was considered the Taliban capital before they moved to Kabul.
Like I said, we were getting rocketed a lot. Like I said, by the time I left, it was like every night. I was lucky. I was in a pretty bad area. Kandahar was really, really rough while I was there. But I was pretty fortunate that I didn't wind up in any situations that were.
And overall, like, would you say that Operation Enduring Freedom was like a success or a failure? Or is there a way to classify it?
Problem is that they tried to make the military into a police force, so they sent us over to do peacekeeping, right? But I didn't go to basic training to learn peacekeeping. I learned how to kill people, and then I went to my AIT, my job training, and I learned how to like order supplies and stuff like that. And that's the story for like most of the military. Using us for peacekeeping missions or occupation is really difficult because that's not what we're trained on. We've never had any training on that. We learned to kill people, to support other people who are doing the killing, like stuff like that. It's not a peacekeeping effort.
Right.
So in that vein, I think that the Operation Enduring Freedom was very poorly thought out and then poorly executed.
Joe also spoke to me about his dislike of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
The VA is the worst thing to ever happen to veterans. It's the most awful, bureaucratic, mismanaged. I mean, because it's such a huge organization that's very difficult to make changes very quickly, you know?
Yeah.
But even like stupid stuff will happen. If you look it up, Google it, it was something like every soldier that had ever taken Montgomery GI benefits since Vietnam, social, date of birth, and name were stolen because this VA guy took his laptop home and was able to have all that information on his laptop.
Wow.
Like, yeah, like and you just think, you're like, I mean, this isn't even something that should come up in hindsight. That's not like a Monday morning quarterback, hindsight is 20/20. That's something that, like, obviously we should not have all that information on one guy's computer, because even if he just sold it, like, that's worth tons to any identity thief, you know? It's the Adjutant General of Afghanistan. It's called the TAG. So that's the guy who's in charge of like all U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Sent out a memo to everybody in country. The memo said that we had to stop forcing Afghans off the side of the road when we were driving in our convoys, right? Because that was our protocol, not to fire on them, but to force them off to the side of the road. It was frustrating because, like, we're not doing that because we just want to be dicks and in charge of the road.
Right.
We're doing it because there are vehicle-borne IEDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices that can blow us up. It's very difficult to imagine what it's like to be surrounded by an entire country of people that hate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think not a ton of people outside of war zones that feel that way,
When I asked Joe to summarize his experience in Afghanistan, he had this to say.
I do think it's one of the best things that I've ever done, but that I would never want to do again.
Yeah.
So I think I mentioned earlier, that kind of wanting to be like Renaissance man kind of thing, wanting to get lots of different experiences and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's definitely not something you would experience in any other way. And I think it is a thing that, I don't know, I can bond with people that I've never met from Japan, from Norway, from all over. And this stuff has happened. I've met people that were military, that former military, and you just start talking. You're like, man, officers suck, right? And they're like, yeah, officers are fucking dickheads. Yeah. And you just jump right into it. You just start talking about your shitty equipment and that this one time that your lieutenant woke you up in the middle of the fucking night to do some stupid shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was actually a really I don't know. I think it's a net positive. It puts a lot of things in perspective.
Before the interview ended, Joe wanted to warn me not to put soap in military care packages.
Another reason why not to send soap is because people always forget, if you send soldiers a bunch of cookies and then soap, what you wind up with by the time they get the box is soap-flavored cookies.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't have any sweets, so they'll still eat them.
Oh.
That's the terrible thing. I'm eating fucking Little Debbie, the oatmeal cream pie things, that taste like Lever 2000. I ate a whole fucking box of them. Anyway, yeah. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
All right, bye.
Watching haters wonder why Gambino